Well, hello everyone. Welcome to another interview, another conversation, and this time we have a special guest today. And even on Memorial Day, here we are doing what we need to do to make sure that the voters of Merced County are well informed. And today we have a special guest. Today we have Merced County District Attorney Kimberly Lewis, and since everybody wants to know and everybody's about to vote and they have their ballots somewhere in on their kitchen table. Well, what better time to get to know who some of our candidates are? And today we have Merced County District Attorney Kimberly Lewis. Good afternoon. How are you?
Oh, good afternoon. I'm doing well. Happy Memorial Day.
Yes, yes. Is the barbecue ready?
Oh, no, see, we did our barbecue yesterday.
Oh, okay. Well, I know that a lot of people are barbecuing today, and hopefully they are having some great time, some great family time. And but also we have the primary elections coming. They're just around the corner, less than 2 weeks away, March 7th. So what is it? It's
You said March.
I said March.
Yeah.
Oh, no, no, not March. June 7th. Okay. It's been a long week. But and we're only a few days away, uh, a little bit over a week away before June 7th to make sure that everyone gets their ballots in. Everyone should already have them at home. And so, Ms. Lewis, what can you tell us? Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are, and where you come from, and what your experience is now that you're running for re-election for Merced County District Attorney's Office.
Certainly. I'm a California native and I grew up in Fresno, uh, graduated from high school there, and then went out of state for college and law school, but I came back home because I wanted to be close to my family. Um, I have been in Merced County since 1998, and I've been practicing law for 25 years in California. 24 of those years is here in Merced. 14 years I've been a prosecutor, and my very first year practicing law, I was a public defender. Um, then I've also have 10 years of experience as a deputy county counsel. But I've raised my family here in Merced. I have 4 children, and all of them went through Merced public schools. And right now we're in the midst of a graduation fest. We've got 3 graduations this spring. So 2 are graduating from college and 1's graduating from high school. But that's the bulk of my experience and my history. I grew up driving through Merced because my grandmother lived in Sonora, and so we would drive through Merced on our way from Fresno in order to get to her house. When I moved to Merced in 1998, it felt very much like coming home because of that history through my childhood. And I tend to gravitate towards smaller communities. So Merced has been a very comfortable fit for me compared to growing up in Fresno. So my grandparents had a 50-acre ranch ranch is probably not the right word. They had 50 acres and they liked to think of themselves as ranchers. But I grew up riding horses out there and being part of feeling more akin to a rural lifestyle because of that. And then also because of my dad's side of the family. When I was growing up, we grew up raising lambs and rabbits and a pig and horses. So coming to Merced it felt very comfortable, and it was the community I wanted to raise my family in. So I've worked with the district attorney's office for now it's about 12 and a half years if you add my first term as district attorney. And then when I was a deputy county counsel, that was in Merced County also, and I worked with the Human Services Agency.
Great. Well, that's amazing. 24 years of experience and 14 as a prosecutor. And so being in Merced, you were in Merced, you left and came back. Now, as a district attorney, it's going to be 4 years,
So
first
my
term.
first term was a 4-year term, and right now I've served 3.5 of that first term. And I'm hoping to be reelected to have another 4-year term. In all honesty, the only year that I had outside of Merced County was when I was working in Stanislaus as a deputy district attorney in Stanislaus. I started working there in the very end of October of 2017. And then in February of 2018, I decided to run for district attorney. So my heart's been in Merced the whole time, even though I had that 1 year outside in Stanislaus.
Okay, so just to kind of follow up on what you mentioned a little bit earlier, that you wanted it to be, well, you're here to, and you're running to be reelected for Merced County District Attorney. Why are you running for reelection? It's been 3.5 years. Why are you looking for 4 more years?
I think that we've done a good job at starting what we set out to do. When I ran in 2018, it was on a platform to return integrity to the district attorney's office. And we've done a good job so far. But, you know, the incumbent at that point had been in the office for 12 years, and change is not something that comes easily in an office or in an office culture. So 3.5 years is a good start at that, but you can't just jump in and do everything all at once. You really do need to move methodically. So we'd like to continue on that track and continue to bring accountability to the district attorney's office and forward that platform of tough, fair, and honest.
That is great, and definitely so. A lot of people don't know. I mean, they hear of the district attorney's office, but they don't really know what is everything that you do. But there's two things, from my understanding, is you as the district attorney elected, um, your primary job. Can you explain what your primary job as the elected district attorneys
So
responsibilities are, and then you also have the entire rest of the office. Can you explain what your office does?
yeah, I think that's a twofold answer. So one is to explain what the district attorney's office does as a whole. A lot of people don't really understand the function of the district attorney's office. Our job is to prosecute crime within the county of Merced. So we're not an agency that is the first responding agency, and we don't have a duty to investigate in the same sense that a law enforcement agency does. So the sheriff's office or your local police department, like Merced Police Department or Livingston Police Department, those are the agencies that have the duty to respond to and investigate crime. Those agencies all prepare reports after they've performed their investigative duties, and if they think there's probable cause that a crime was committed, then they forward those reports to the district attorney's office. Our attorneys review those reports, and we make a determination about whether or not we believe that we can prove a case beyond a reasonable doubt. So our threshold is different from the law enforcement agencies because we're looking to see if there's sufficient evidence to prove a case to a jury beyond a reasonable doubt. If there is, then we'll file charges, and we're the attorneys who represent the people of the state of California in prosecuting an individual for a crime that's been committed. We'll take a case from the time the report's submitted to our office and follow it all the way through sentencing. And lately, there are continuing duties that are growing because the California legislature keeps adding on to our responsibilities. So we follow cases all the way through parole applications and applications to be resentenced, which lately means we have a whole group of folks who have just been given a new legal authority to petition for resentencing. And they are among the most serious offenders that there are, because their crimes include murder, attempted murder, and manslaughter. But the legislature just gave them a reason to petition for resentencing. So we have some cases that are as old as 1985 that we may be required to relitigate in order to keep those individuals who have already been established as guilty in the California Department of Corrections serving their sentence. Anyway, that's the role of the district attorney's office, but the role of the district attorney is a little bit different. I'm actually a department head for a department within the county of Merced, because the district attorney's office is a county department. We have over 90 full-time and part-time employees, and it's my job to manage that office and direct that office. So you have to have a wide variety of skills, including personnel and human resources experience, management experience. We have a $16 million budget that we forward to the Board of Supervisors every year for approval. So it requires the ability to manage and maintain a budget and prepare those budget requests and do a 5-year or 10-year plan, depending on what the needs are, so that you can anticipate and let the county know what upcoming expenses need to be planned for. In addition to that, there's just the general need to keep the building safe and to maintain the building in a suitable way for staff. So in our department, we have about 4 branches: investigators, attorneys, legal support staff, and our victim witness advocates. And you have to be able to manage all 4 of those branches, not just the attorney branch.
Okay, so wow, that's a lot of work.
I stay busy, very much so. But there are also these sort of duties as assigned. There are things that you can never anticipate that come along, and so special investigations are things that garner my attention. Among those, during my first term, was an investigation into practices at the sheriff's office. There also was an investigation that came across Livingston that involved some issues in Livingston. Mm-hmm. So those kinds of specialized investigations. Another area this term was the Employment Development Department, EDD, fraud with all the fraud that was going on related to the COVID payments. Those kinds of specialized prosecutions or investigations usually have more of my specialized attention, whereas the standard felonies and misdemeanors are usually handled by the deputy district attorneys in the office.
I see. Wow, it's so definitely the experience of not just being an attorney, but actually having that additional experience required to be a district attorney, coming from and understanding how the human resources department works, how the finance department works, and I think you mentioned something very important, which I get to understand a little bit better coming from a business experience background. The short-term, mid-term, and long-term planning is not something. Well, it is something that is very important, and it is also not something that everybody thinks about when they think of a district or of someone running for district attorney.
It's honestly a lot like being the CEO of a company. You need to have your short-term, your mid-term, and long-term goals, and you need to plan accordingly for that. And at the same time, because we're a county department, we don't control our budget necessarily. The budget is determined for us by the Board of Supervisors. So we make our requests, but everything that we request, it has to go through that sifter of what the needs are for the entire county. So in a lot of ways, a CEO has a little bit more self-determination, because what they earn can be fed back into the corporation. but we don't have that kind of control.
Okay. So up to a certain point, you have to deal with and make decisions based on the budget that is approved, in this case, by the Board of Supervisors, who are the ones that assigned how much they will allow for your office to have. So I guess in a way, you need to have a maintain a good relationship with the Board of Supervisors to uh, be able to work with them based on your needs or on your department needs.
Absolutely, and solid communication. So, for example, right now, we had an unexpected need come to us after we had submitted proposed budget. There was a legislative change that I already talked about just a little bit in saying that the legislature is permitting people to petition the court for resentencing.
Mhm.
Well, there was a change that expanded the kind of people who could make that petition. It used to be only individuals who had been convicted of murder could make that kind of petition. But the California legislature expanded that group to include attempted murder and manslaughter. Well, that's created an additional workload in our office that we didn't necessarily anticipate. So we've had to go to the Board of Supervisors after proposed budget was put forward and let them know that our workload since January has increased substantially. In addition, we used to have an extra help employee that was taking care of those petitions for us, and that person has a vacancy and become a full-time employee. And our likelihood of finding anybody who's willing to take part-time work is very slim because of the employment market right now.
Yeah.
So for those two reasons that were sudden changes after proposed budget had been submitted, we've had to go back and say, please, can we make some adjustments that were not anticipated? Here's the reason why. And really, as a public safety reason, because the last thing we want is for people who have been convicted and sentenced of murder and manslaughter and attempted murder. You don't want those people to be released into the community before their sentence originally was set to expire.
Okay, I think you just mentioned something very important, and it connects with my next question that I want to follow up with. So the district attorney's office job is to prosecute. Then you go to court. The they're found guilty. The judge gives a sentence. Then they go serve their time, and that's it for you. Is that right? And then
Usually, it's not quite it. So
okay.
anytime people come up for a parole, then we are noticing the victims that were involved in the case with the individual who's coming up for parole. If those victims are wanting to advocate in some way at the hearing related to somebody's parole hearing, then we help them do that. And whether a victim is advocating or not, we're screening all of those parole hearings and we're advocating at parole hearings as well. And then now this new category of offender, these folks who can apply for and petition to be resentenced, we're handling those cases. So even though most of our work is done after an individual is sentenced, there is still some duty that's carried by the district attorney's office, and we need to remain alert to that.
Okay, so we do have some questions here in the chat, and one of them I do believe it relates to what we're just talking about. And the question is from Anita Parra. Then why would you release them? Will you be the one releasing?
No, I never make the decision to release anybody.
Okay.
This is a petition that's going to a judge in the Merced County Superior Court, and the judge is going to be evaluating the law and making a determination about whether or not these individuals qualify under the law to be resentenced and to have their sentence reduced. Now, Part of the problem, though, is that we will be required to relitigate issues that we had already decided at the time of their conviction. So, for example, if you entered a negotiated plea for attempted murder, that meant that we didn't need to litigate the issue because we settled it. But because these individuals are petitioning to be resentenced, if the court believes that they've met the criteria that's necessary to permit resentencing, or in that battle to determine whether or not they've met the criteria to be resentenced, we are going to have to be likely to prove up the case all over again, which means we have to find the witnesses that were involved in the original incident. And as I said, right now, the oldest case that we have is from 1985. And so we need to investigate and find the witnesses from that original incident in 1985 in order to prevent these people from being released. We are opposed to their release. We absolutely are doing everything we can within the law as the legislature has provided to us to prevent their release. But, some people actually do meet criteria and qualify. And then there may be situations where, because the case is so old, we will not be able to find the same witnesses that were available at the time that the incident originally occurred. And in those cases, there may be people who are released as a result of that.
Yeah. There are a couple of cases, and there's some more questions that I will get to in the chat. But there are a couple of cases that that have been out there. One of them happening in the Gastin, Santanella, Los Baños area, where a person was released, and then I believe within a couple of days that person assaulted and ended up killing. I believe it was.
There was a dairy worker, right?
A dairy worker, yes.
Yeah.
That
was a really unfortunate situation, and I think that's it's an unfortunate example of what's going on because the jail in Merced is too small. That individual had been on felony probation, and he was on felony probation for two different felony charges, and he violated probation. So our office prosecuted the violation of probation, and we were successful in that. They found him guilty, and they found him to be in violation of probation. We had negotiated when he was entered his plea on the original felony counts that he was on probation for. We had negotiated that he be given a suspended sentence. What that means is that the court sentenced him to prison, but held off on enacting that prison sentence in order to place him on probation. So when he violated probation, we argued that prison sentence should be imposed and that he should go immediately to serve his sentence in the Department of Corrections. But the probation department, for some reason, did not recommend that he go to the Department of Corrections. Instead, they recommended that he spend an additional 6 months in the county jail. So the judge accepted probation's recommendation and sentenced him to 6 months. When he was about 30 days away from finishing his sentence, he got an early release from our Merced County Jail. Now, the sheriff doesn't have any duty to notice anybody about that. The sheriff maintains and manages the individuals who are in custody at the county jail. So this individual was released to the public, and within a week, he had committed a robbery at one dairy, and then a day later or 2 days later committed a robbery that actually produced a homicide at another dairy in Gustine. There was very diligent police work through the sheriff's office was done in tracking him down and identifying him. I think the Gustine Police Department also helped because they were acquainted with him, and so they were able to help in the investigation as well. And he was arrested on the homicide and the robbery charges, and he was successfully prosecuted, and he will be spending, I can't recall his exact sentence, but I think it was in the neighborhood of 50 or 60 years to life in prison as a result of the convictions.
Okay. And there's another case that I came across the internet, and it's been going around a DUI case that happened a few years ago in the Delhi area, where the individual was previously convicted of 2 DUIs, and this third time, this individual did a hit and run and actually killed, I believe it was a 17-year-old young girl.
It was.
And
That case happened in 2018. It
Okay.
happened in January of 2018. So it's before I was the district attorney in the office. It's while I was working in Stanislaus County. It did involve a girl in Delhi who was walking at night along a road that was a well-traveled road. And an individual who was on probation for 2 misdemeanor DUIs struck her and killed her. And unfortunately, that case was reviewed by the district attorney's office at the time. It happens to be a case that Nicole Silvera reviewed and filed charges on. I've reviewed the case. I've given it to a chief deputy in my office and also another deputy district attorney in my office. We've looked at that case, and we are of the opinion that it honestly was misfiled. He was charged with failing to use an interlock device, which is a misdemeanor offense. And so when he was arraigned, he admitted that failure to use an interlock device. He pled no contest to that misdemeanor offense. And because of double jeopardy, it's impossible to charge him now with homicide in regards to the death of this young girl or young woman. He served, I believe, a 5-day sentence. But the district attorney's office at that time went back and filed violations of probation on his misdemeanor charges, and found him to be in violation on the misdemeanor charges and sentenced him to 6 months on each of those misdemeanor counts. I don't know how much time he served. I haven't looked at that. What I do know is that our Merced County Jail very rarely keeps misdemeanor offenders in jail because, as we talked about before, there's not sufficient room. And so most often individuals on misdemeanor offenses are released immediately and serve their sentence on the ankle bracelet.
So, so my understanding is that this individual was wrongly charged, and that is why he ended up not, I guess.
So there are notes in the file that indicate that Miss Silvera was of the opinion that because this girl, this young woman, was walking in the roadway, that prevented and in some way absolved the defendant from responsibility. And that is not true. He was an individual who was on probation for DUI. He did have a blood alcohol level when he was tested. First, it was a 0.05, and then it was a 0.04. Now, if you look at the times when he was tested and you look at the numbers, you can determine whether he had a rising or a falling blood alcohol level. Because he had a 0.05 at his first test and then a 0.04 at his second test, That's an indication that he had a falling blood alcohol level. If you extrapolate out, then most likely at the time of the incident, he had a 0.07 blood alcohol level. And while that does not meet the legal limit for an individual who's twice been convicted of DUI and been advised that drinking any alcohol is likely to produce great bodily injury or death, it was sufficient to justify homicide charges in this case, especially if you add the fact that he knew that he was required to drive only a vehicle equipped with an interlock device, and he was not driving a vehicle with an interlock device. Plus, he knew that street was frequented by individuals riding bicycles, walking, and also animals, because he told the CHP officers that he had in the past hit dogs that were in the roadway on that exact street. So he was an individual who was aware of the high traffic on that street and the need to be cautious. But even more damning in this situation is the fact that his son was driving with him, and his son saw the young woman before she was struck. And by the description that this young man gave, at the speed that the defendant testified he was driving at, which was 30 miles an hour, he had sufficient time to stop if he had been paying attention in the way that is required, because his passenger saw the young woman in the street, in the roadway, and estimated the amount of time between seeing her and when she was hit. And at 30 miles an hour, he had sufficient time to bring the vehicle to a complete stop without injuring her if he had been paying proper attention. So when you add all of those things together, combined with the fact that he had a duty not to drive with any alcohol in his system, let alone at a 0.07, it's a case that would have very properly been charged as a homicide.
Okay, so definitely experience. It's important, especially when you are working for the district attorney's office, or actually in this case for any office. So
well, and I'm going to say that there are two things related to that. One is experience, but also recognizing your area of expertise. Now, I'm an individual. I have my personal trial record is that I've been to trial 38 times, but that doesn't mean that I'm an expert on DUI death. I've never taken a DUI death case to trial. So in that regard, I know that I'm not an expert in that area. And so I would take that case to an attorney who has regularly handled those kinds of cases in order to seek their opinion, which is what I did when I found out about this case. That's why I asked one of my chief deputies to look at the case, because he has prior experience as a highway patrol officer, plus he's had sufficient experience trying cases of that nature to understand them. And then I also took the case to another deputy district attorney in the office, because he also has a high level of experience prosecuting driving under the influence cases as felony death cases. So it's really important to be able to recognize your own strengths and weaknesses. So instead of assuming that you have the knowledge required, to work on things in a group context, so that there's a sense of humility that's required.
okay.
Can't assume that you always know everything.
Yes. We have a few more questions. One of them, and this one is from Jay Lopez. Hello, DA Lewis is not currently endorsed by the sheriff. What is she doing to build a better relationship with the sheriff and his office?
I think at a certain time, it's important to understand what caused some of the problems that are going on with the sheriff and myself. And what I'd like to point out is that I work really hard to make sure that anything that is a disagreement personally is not reflected professionally within my office or within my activities in my position as a district attorney. And so any opinion that I have about an individual really is not important, because it should not interfere with the work that I do in my office, or the work that I do in reaching out to other departments. But I think that it's been challenging for the sheriff to maintain that kind of distinction. My office was required to perform an investigation into the sheriff's department. What we found as a product of that investigation is that the sheriff's office had been recording attorney-client privileged phone calls between inmates and their attorneys. And that recording had been going on from 2012 to 2020. And then we also found that after we informed the sheriff that calls were being recorded improperly, calls continued to be recorded. So that it's a very challenging moment. We were required to let the public defender's office know that their clients had been affected by this, and that calls that they had engaged in with their clients had been recorded. As a result, we had motions to dismiss that were filed by the public defender's office, and those motions included hearings in front of a Merced County Superior Court judge. At the time, the public defender's office subpoenaed witnesses from the sheriff's office to testify in that case. And I was required to ask the judge to give those sheriff's deputies a warning, to let them know that our office was investigating a crime and that they were potential suspects, and that it was my belief that they qualified for the Fifth Amendment, and that whether or not they testified, they should be advised of the right to avoid self-incrimination. And there were deputies from the sheriff's office who invoked their Fifth Amendment rights at these hearings. Well, of course, that created a sense of strife between the district attorney's office and the sheriff's office. I can understand that. But I had a duty to investigate, and I have a continuing duty to investigate the circumstances surrounding this incident, because not only were 16,343 phone calls recorded, but 170 phone calls were listened to. And in other jurisdictions where the district attorney's office did not immediately act and alert the defense bar of those sorts of problems, the district attorney's office in those counties were implicated as benefiting from the improper recording of inmate phone calls. So I had to be sure that my office was not implicated in any way. And the only way to do that was by properly investigating the circumstances. So I do absolutely want to improve the relationship with the sheriff's office, but what I would like to point out is that we've worked really hard to maintain our investigative relationships already. So we have an agricultural crimes investigator that works with the sheriff's office. We have to work together because the sheriff's office submits all of their reports to our agency. What I will say is that the sheriff's office has continued to submit their reports to our agency. And right now, we're at nearly an all-time high. We've filed on 70% of the reports that were submitted from the sheriff's office in 2021. And that's a really high number. We're publishing those statistics this week, and you'll be able to look online to see what percentage of cases we've filed criminal charges on from all of the agencies within the county of Merced. But my point is that in investigations related to agricultural crimes, in investigations that are related to active homicides, whenever we can be of service to the sheriff's office, we always are offering our assistance in whatever way that we can.
All right, and we have another question and then another comment related to the same question. This question is also from Anita Parra. What about the investigation for the Heaven Murillo case? Why couldn't you do more in a case of a child who was brutally murdered?
So the Heaven Murillo case has been adjudicated, and it leaves me a little bit more freedom to talk about it because of that. However, the circumstances surrounding her death were, and let me say it in this way, the circumstances surrounding the recovery of her body were very brutal. And so there was a sense, and it continues, a persisting sense of trying to preserve the dignity of the victim, and also a respect for the family in not discussing in too wide a way the conditions of Heaven's body at the time that she was found. What I can say is that we negotiated a plea that the entire office, from our investigator who was involved deeply in this case to the deputy DA who was handling the prosecution and myself, we at all levels are convinced that the negotiated plea was in the interest of justice. And this is the reason. When Heaven's body was found, it was badly decomposed and it had been exposed to the elements for quite some time. As a result, the autopsy was unable to provide a cause of death. So her body was actually given to a forensic anthropologist, and we had a report that was generated from the forensic anthropologist. Now, in plain terms, what that really means is that in trying to seek evidence from Heaven's body, we were left to the conditions of her bones. And the forensic anthropologist's report indicated that there was no way to determine whether or not the injuries that were observed had occurred before or after death. Our duty as prosecutors is to prosecute a crime beyond a reasonable doubt. And if the scientific evidence can't determine when an injury was inflicted, whether it was inflicted before or after death, and there is no cause of death, then it makes it really difficult to prove that a murder was committed. And so the case was negotiated as a manslaughter case for that reason. We deeply understand the depth of the loss that the Murillo family has sustained, and I also deeply understand that the justice system, there are many times when a case moves through the justice system that it's impossible to provide true justice to a family and to have them feel whole. And this is one of those cases. And I think in many ways that it's a tragedy when the justice system is unable to provide all of the solace that a family desires. But there are things, there are facts and circumstances that are beyond our control. And one of the things that we have to do as prosecutors is work with the evidence as it is presented to us, not as we would wish it.
Yes, and so this next question also, it's connected to another question that has come up. Well, I've seen it on social media quite often, and the question is: do you plan on helping our county more in our present time, especially with so much corruption in our present time? So many people are doing wrong and are not being prosecuted. And the question that I want to connect this to is the allegations that you are using your office to arrest, or when your office arrested two police officers from the city of Livingston, in a way, well, in particular, they were arrested for falsifying police reports, but also connected to allegations of corruption. What can you say about that?
So, what I can say is that I am committed to bringing to Merced um, the prosecution of cases based on the evidence, the law that is in effect at the time, and the highest ethical values and standards. So, what that means is that all of the actions at the district attorney's office are determined by the evidence that's available and the law and our ethical obligations. And it's different in every situation because the evidence in every case is different. So, in the circumstances that related to Livingston in particular, um, we believed at the time that the arrests were made in that case that there was sufficient evidence to establish beyond a reasonable doubt that both officers had been untruthful in the way that they reported on a crime. And it was our belief, because it was a sergeant involved with an officer who was new and was still a probationary officer, that the sergeant had a deeper sense of responsibility for the incident because of his leadership role. Now, the younger officer is the officer who actually wrote the report and authored the report. And so when that case went to preliminary hearing, because the younger officer is the officer who wrote the report, we had a difference of opinion. The Merced County Superior Court judge and our office, we had a different interpretation of the law. And the Merced County Superior Court judge who heard the case was not of the opinion that there was sufficient evidence to show that the sergeant had instructed or influenced the junior officer in a way that was sufficient to violate the law. Now, the case is, as far as I know, is still pending against the junior officer. And I don't think there's very much question about his guilt in that case. In regards to both officers involved, lying is something that is a stain on the record of a law enforcement officer, because the officers, their role and function is to be able to testify in court to the things that they've seen and observed. And if it is documented that they have been dishonest in any way, then we're required to tell the defense attorney about that incident of dishonesty, and it clouds the likelihood of truthfulness for their testimony at any point in the future. So for both officers, it is we are in a circumstance where we would not use either officer to testify as a material witness in any case that we prosecuted.
Okay, so in trying to find an answer of that question of how you, or the allegation that your office was was using its power to for your office's benefit in the arrest of these two officers, how would your office be able to benefit?
Well, yeah, I don't see any benefit to us in that regard at all. It is my belief that we have a duty to communicate to the community that the truth is the only thing that we stand for. Okay. And to have evidence that was on video that an officer, a supervising officer, was instructing a junior officer to be untruthful in order to protect the employment status of a citizen who was a suspect. Whether it's a small amount of corruption or whether it's a big amount of corruption, it's still corruption. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that we should be tolerating any level of corruption, and I absolutely can't put forward individuals who are untruthful as witnesses to testify to material issues in the cases that I prosecute.
Okay. And the last question that I have, and we'll wait to see if there are any more questions by people online. Why should the voters vote for you and not your opponent?
I think that my level of experience is dramatically different from the level of experience that my opponent brings forward. I have, through my experience as a deputy county counsel, I worked for 8 years handling human resources or personnel issues, and management issues, and learning and understanding management in the largest department within the county because I represented the Human Services Agency. We had 550 to 650 staff at the time that I was representing them. In the last 3.5 years, I've also added to my direct management and skills and experience. Um, my opponent has never managed a staff or supervised a staff at all because she's never had direct management responsibility or supervisory responsibility. She had temporary responsibility for a short period of time, and that's it. Uh, she and I have comparable trial records in that we've taken a similar number of cases to trial. But I have an additional 12 years of experience that she does not. And that experience is in contracts and budget and fiscal and understanding our county government and our county government processes. All of those things are skills that I use every day in my role as district attorney. So um, I I think that it's really important to look. Well, I'm going to say one more thing too. Um, it was very difficult to sit in a courtroom and explain to the sheriff office witnesses that I was in front of that they were suspects and that they were under investigation. Um, in in one case, the individual I made that statement to was an individual who had been a detective for me and with me when I was handling child victim crimes as a deputy district attorney. So we had worked for at least 2 years together, handling cases together, and that was 20 years ago. So I've known that person for a very long time, and to look at him in the face and say to him that he was a suspect in a case that I was investigating and that I was advising and asking the court to advise him of his Fifth Amendment right was a very difficult thing. But it's my belief that that's exactly what you want your district attorney to do. I think that there should be independence between the district attorney's office and law enforcement because at the heart of it, the district attorney's office is always going to be asked to assess the evidence and the law and the ethics of the situation and make a determination. And those should be the only things that are guiding and leading the determination in that case. It should not be dependent upon the relationship of the parties involved or the status of an individual involved. All of those things should be based only on the evidence and the law and the ethics, and everything else should be put aside. There's a reason justice is blind, and justice has a blindfold on every statue that's representing her. And it's my duty to pursue that job in as independent and unbiased a way as possible.
Okay. Well, we don't have any more additional questions coming from the people watching online on Facebook and YouTube. And before we complete our conversation, is there anything else that you want to add in regards to your office, to your experience, or to your reelection campaign?
I put forward to the citizens of Merced County that every day I go to work, I am doing my best to live the things that I'm proclaiming in Tough, Fair, and Honest. I'm working very hard to be a servant to the citizens of Merced County.
All right. Well, thank you very much for making the time, especially on Memorial Day, and for being here and for putting yourself out there. I can understand that it's not easy when you have to represent an entire county, and when understanding not everybody is happy whether or not they understand or they're informed of what is it that you do or don't do in your office. Well, thank you very much. And for everyone watching, until next time, we will continue to try and bring you the information. And that is for you to make the best decision before June 7th or even up to June 7th. And if you have any questions, make sure you reach out to us and reach out to Miss Kimberly Lewis on Facebook. Okay, can you tell us about your Facebook? Where can they find you if they have any additional questions?
Yeah, we're at Kimberly Helms Lewis for District Attorney on Facebook. I think that's KHLFORDA. Our website is also khlforda.com. And also my email address is the same thing, khlforda@gmail.com. You can reach out anytime, and it's me. There's no other person who's sifting or funneling through the email or the messages that come through on Facebook. It goes directly to me. And thank you, Jose Moran, for hosting me today. I'm really grateful to have an opportunity to speak with you and to present more about my campaign to Merced County.
Well, thank you like I said, for making the time. And thank you, everyone, for watching. If you have any questions, make sure you reach out to Miss Kimberly Lewis. Thank you. Until next time, we'll see you. Bye-bye.